You're live on News at Prime. Thanks for staying with us tonight. There are concerns around the impact of the ongoing drought on food security. AgriSA yesterday painted a dire picture, saying the country's rural economies face possible collapse. Some farmers are already talking about getting out of the sector. They're losing billions of rand. Let's discuss this further. We're joined by the Agricultural Research Council CEO, Dr. Shadrack Moephuli. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Dr. Shadrack. Firstly, let's just perhaps get into the state of affairs. When we look at that agricultural sector, we've been hearing farmers talk about their plight and how in the red many of them are. From the research that you've been conducting, how dire is the situation?
Yes. Hello.
All right. We seem to be having a connection problem with Dr. Shadrack. I'm going to try and stay with this line, Dr. Shadrack, if you'll bear with me. There is a delay on this line, but my question is, from the research that you've been doing at the Agricultural Scientific Research Council, how dire is the situation that farmers find them?
Moderate to extreme, in that there are some districts in the country that are experiencing extreme drought, and others are experiencing severe drought, while others are experiencing moderate drought in different parts of the country. So different farmers in different parts of the country are affected differently. And of course, that requires different interventions in all of those different parts of the country.
Let's talk about the impact that this drought then has on the planting season. Many have raised concerns that they might miss planting season, which of course has implications going into 2020.
Correct. It will have some implications in terms of the planting season. In the first instance, it now means that there is delayed planting that's going to be planted fairly late, and we'll talk about what that will mean for some farmers. But then also what's going to be critical is whether we'll be able to get sufficient rain during the rainy period that has just started in all of those parts that are much more important for us to have the right kind of crop that will actually mature at the right time, as for us to ensure food security for everybody in the country. In terms of the delayed rains, one of the critical things that farmers must begin to think about is those plant varieties or crop varieties that short season, and that will mature fairly early, that will actually give the yields, while at the same time will actually require less rain, but also grow much faster during the shortened period of the planting season and the rainy season. We're hoping that these rains will stay on, even if they were late, that will stay on a little bit longer, so that there'll be sufficient soil moisture for our crops to grow in different parts of the country.
Of course, one of the biggest concerns, especially for South Africans, would be the knock-on effect, especially on the cost of food. So food price inflation, what are the links that we can anticipate to see there?
Well, there are different kinds of effects that are likely to be coming. It might be at the moment and for the next few weeks that we are going to see a lot of meat in our supermarkets, because farmers are getting rid of some of their livestock that might have been affected by the drought, which then makes a bit more meat available at the supermarket, and maybe the prices will be a little bit more affordable. But after Christmas, or shortly after the Christmas season, we are likely to have a very difficult situation in terms of the meat prices, because there might be a shortage of meat supply, because all the animals that would have been made available, the majority of them would have actually long been made available much earlier in the market, which will have a knock-on effect on the prices of some of the meat products. But in terms of your maize meal and your other staple crops, I doubt there would be much greater effect given the current scenario, because that maize has already been harvested, it's already been milled, it's already essentially being in the warehouses and coming through to the supermarkets for people to buy and eat. What becomes important is the knock-on effect a few months later, 6 months down the line from now, when it comes to harvest time, which becomes a question as to whether we have the right kinds of yields that we need as a country in order to ensure that there is sufficient domestic supply for human consumption as well as domestic supply for animal feed. Because remember, we plant maize both for animal feed but also as an additive to other production systems and processing systems. We also plant fodder, which is important for animal production during the same period, and therefore it's going to be very important that there are sufficient quantities of all of these so that we don't have as negative an effect downstream, especially towards the winter in terms of the harvesting and the yields that are.
The agricultural sector, in terms of its contribution to GDP and even just the size of the sector, seems to have been declining post-democratic South Africa. What are the kind of interventions that are needed to ensure that it doesn't get any smaller than it already is?
Well, the size of the agricultural sector in relation to the GDP as a proportion, as a ratio, is relatively small. But that's only when you're talking about primary agriculture, which is around 3% of the GDP. However, what you are forgetting is that agriculture has a huge multiplier effect, somewhere in the order of a multiplier effect of about 7 to 9, which then means that a whole lot of other processed products and manufactured products actually are derived from agriculture. So if you factor in the indirect contribution of agriculture to the GDP, it's actually closer to 30% of the economy. It has a huge impact on the economy. Therefore, we shouldn't really undermine it. Because it also has a major implication in terms of jobs, both directly and indirectly. Now, in terms of the future, diversification of the products and the quality of the products derived from agriculture is likely to grow and also to become a little bit more sophisticated, and therefore the implication and the impact on the economy in terms of creating jobs is likely to be even much bigger.